welcome to Small Group Training. I am Jared Suits, and I will just be doing the intro and the exit, and outro. Yeah, thank you. And so our speaker, our leader today, he's not really going to speak. It's an interactive exercise that we're going to be going through today. So that's why we're in tables and things like that. And you might say, well, that guy looks like you. Well, he is. It's my brother. And you're like, why'd you bring your brother for this? Nepotism. No. So my brother John was a small group pastor out in Idaho at Eagle Christian Church, a church that has a popular. What's the size of that church?
Yeah, it's, when I left, it was pushing 3,500.
3,500 people. So it's a big church. And how many small groups did you?
Over 60.
Yeah, so he had over 60. So he he also has he went to seminary, and part of his seminary education, he specialized in some small group training and stuff like that. And so we've been talking about these 5 different areas, and one of the areas that sort of is interwoven into this is community, and community sort of is brought forth through small groups. And small groups can mean a lot of different things. It can mean Sunday morning Sunday school. It can mean a Tuesday night Bible study at your house. It can mean a group of guys that go golfing. It can mean whatever. It's basically a group that comes together in discipleship and religious sort of spiritual focus.
Well, good afternoon. How's everyone doing?
Good.
No, that was convincing. That was good. Well, I'm glad to be here and glad to help you all with this growing small group ministry. I think it's important. I invested a lot of time in small group leadership development and training, and so Jared mentioned some of my credentials. I do think it's important to know that I'm not just making this stuff up. It's been You should listen to me. I mean, I say that. Aristotle, right? He said there are three ways that people connect to a speaker, to a rhetorician. He said logos, which is your logic, right? Your pathos, your emotional appeal, and then he said your ethos, your credibility. And which one did he say was the most important? It's your ethos. It's your credibility. And so if you don't know that I have credentials, then you're not going to listen to me. So I know more about small groups than you is what I'm trying to say.
What a jerk.
Well, and to clarify, I've started another degree in management at UT, so I want to expand my understanding of leadership and management principles, particularly in nonprofit work, church work as well. So I'm a student again. So I have to ask, because this is always important, and this is interactive. If you don't talk to me, you're missing out. Because I didn't come here to just lecture. I really want to hear your thoughts. Because guess what? I walk away from here, and no offense to you all, I don't think about this ministry again. But I don't. I go home. I know it's harsh, but I don't. You know why? Because I have my own church, right? I have my own context. I don't worship here, but you do, right? So if you don't buy into this process, and it's not collective, and it's not from within, then it's to your own detriment. So I really want your feedback, okay? Does that make sense? So I have a question. Why small groups? Like, who cares? Why small groups?
It's a place people connect together. They get to know one another, learn to care for one another, and it extends beyond the group meeting itself to life in general.
Yeah, that's good.
It's harder to get lost.
Harder to get lost. That's great. Can you maybe clarify that and expand on that?
Well, in a small group, I think people look out for each other if they're missing something. In a large group, I think you can sneak in and sneak out very easily, and no one ever know that you're.
Doesn't know your name.
And I think in a small group, we have a tendency to sit in a room that we see each other's faces.
Yeah.
In church, we look at people's heads, and you don't get their expressions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you don't see what's going on in the pain or what celebrations or whatever.
That's great. Yeah. Anything else?
Make others feel important. And
Sure.
Maybe like if they're not there, they're missed.
Yeah.
So some people need that.
What else?
Good evangelism.
Okay. Yeah. It can be a great way to share the good news. Yeah, absolutely. What else?
I think sometimes it's easier to invite someone to a small group they're more comfortable than to even to a home or a classroom, a small setting as compared to a large corporate worship. So it might be a simulation.
Yeah.
It can be more intimate.
Yeah.
They're like talking in things that you don't talk about in a larger group.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people afraid to speak in front of others are more likely to speak up and feel comfortable sharing
Yeah.
their feelings too.
Yeah. What else? Well, that's good. And I think your answers are all very valid, and they really point to the direction I want to talk about for a second, which is while there is a theological reason and a discipleship reason for these small groups, most of these answers I would put under the realm of they're meeting a sociological need. They're meeting a need for what? Community. All right? And I say this as kind of like a scandalous statement, but in an ideal society, you wouldn't need small groups. Now, what do you think I mean by that? Like, why? Well, let's talk a little bit about that. I'll unpack that. Small groups are a very modern, a fairly modern concept within the history of Christianity. I mean, this idea of a formal small group that is developed. Any clue who's considered often? He's often called the father of small groups. Take a guess.
John Wesley.
Oh my goodness! That's right. Then why do you have me here talking to you? Shouldn't your pastor know that?
was dead.
Yeah, he's hard.
Calvin was modern and John Wesley. No.
But well, and remembering the church is 2,000 years old, so Wesley's fairly modern, all things considered. He's a latecomer, and and during his life, what's going on in England? There's a lot going on. But what do you think might lead to this fragmentation in society, where people need these intimate circles?
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution.
My goodness, this table right here is so talented.
People are moving into cities.
That's exactly right.
Breakdown of the
Because really, at the heart of the church is called a parish, right? Right? Anybody know? I'm going to test this table now. Anybody know what the etymology of parish means? Oh, I got this table. All right. This is where that overpriced seminary education comes in handy. It comes from two Greek words, par, which means alongside, and oikos, means house. The church is that which is alongside the house, the community. The reason you didn't need small groups historically was that the church was at the center of a village type model, right? And you didn't need the creation of community. And so, but we don't live in that context, so we have to address that, right? I mean, we have a real need for community. Do you agree? Yes or no?
Yes.
Is it natural for people to experience community in today's society? No. How many people know more than 4 of their neighbors? How many people have been into more than 3 of their neighbors' homes? Yeah, that list got smaller, right? That says a lot. I know one of my neighbors' names. I think his name is Bill, but it could be Fred. We don't experience community this way. But do we need it? Right? We are a creature that needs community. All right? We were made in the image and likeness of God, and God exists in community with the idea of the Trinity. And so we have to address this. And I really do come from that. I don't even really want to talk the theology behind it, because we could get caught up in a lot of stuff. I really want to hone in on this idea that this is about creating community and meeting a real need in the people that come to your groups. Now, there are all sorts of things that within those groups, things like evangelism and sharing the faith and inviting new people to church. But people are showing up because they want what you've talked about: intimacy, the ability to share, to actually feel like they matter and have a voice, that there's somebody in their church that knows when they're there or not. So, Stanley Hauerwas says that, when Americans talk about community, they really mean we need to invent community. That's a paraphrase of a quote. But this idea that we have to make it, we've got to form it, and it's not natural. And so we have to own that there's something we're doing here that we have to create. And this is why small group leadership is so important, because it's not like getting together and doing something that's actually natural, okay? It's going to take a lot of effort on the part of the leader, the host, and the participants to make this work. I've run a lot of small groups, and I'm going to tell you, a lot of them fail. Most small groups just don't even last more than 6 months, okay? It's important. You should know that. I'm looking at a lot of failures right now. I'm just kidding. No, I think we can overcome that with training. I really do. I think these things can be overcome with quality training and thought about how intentional you are. And you have to, if there's one word you hear from me the whole day, it's intentionality, okay? You have to be intentional to make this work. Just thinking that you open your house, put some, tap water out, good old, like Mama used to do, Jared, tap water, just good old tap water. You should really call him out on that. I mean, there's not even enough water to give everybody, man. Don't give him a raise. Don't give him a raise. But seriously, you have to be intentional, okay? So I'm going to just do a little bit of talking up front, and then we're going to actually try to model small group experiences by doing small groups, okay? And we have enough people here to do several small groups, okay? Here's my basic definition of a small group, all right? This is really simple. Small groups are any group between 4 and 15 persons who covenant together to learn and serve in the context of an intimate and personal community. Okay? Now, why that range of 4 to 15? Any pushback on that? Do you think a small group could be different numbers? I mean, I think I'm right, but I want to hear your feedback. Seriously.
You're in danger sometimes of having it be too small, but then you do not
Yes.
want to get so large that you really lose
Yeah.
your main point
Yeah.
of what you're trying to do, which
Yeah.
is to connect with people.
Yes, I think that's great. That's exactly what I would say. And there is sociological research, you should know that under 4, a lot of sociologists consider 3 to be what's called like an intimate circle. You can no longer, you're talking about things that could get so intimate that it would actually be prohibitive to the small group experience. And it would not even be really a group at that point. We're talking about accountability partners, 2 or 3 very close friends that keep you accountable. And we need those kind of relationships, right? I hope you have somebody that you're intimate with. But that doesn't work necessarily in a group, because as close as you want this group to be, I will say this, if it gets too close, you'll kill the group. Promise you. I've seen it 1,000 times. Boy, we started confessing a lot and people didn't show up the next week. Yeah, because that dude just aired his adultery to the group and it made everyone feel uncomfortable. I'm sorry, it's true. Like, I remember being at a church where they said, anybody got something they want to say, after the altar call? It was kind of that kind of community. And this guy got up and confessed adultery to everyone, and no one was looking up. Everyone was, well, it's about that time. Just bless Brother Dan, but Cracker Barrel, I got to get there. And I mean, it's uncomfortable. All right, I'm being real. Like, there's a level of intimacy that you need to foster, but if it gets too intimate, it does actually kill the group. Now, why 15? Why not go bigger than 15?
I would almost say, I've seen a lot of active Sunday school classes that were bigger.
Sure. What kind of classroom experience was that? Was there a lot of sharing, you feel like, in that class? Or was it more lecture style like this?
Probably more lectures.
Yeah. And see, this is why I'm being, I would say that is no longer a small group. I would say that's a class. And some of this is just from my experience. Like at Eagle, that was a specific designation. If you were larger than 15, we didn't call you a small group. We called you a classroom. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think churches need that, okay? And so smaller than 3 becomes too intimate. Larger than 15, you have to move to lecture format, which means you need a content expert. And who here thinks they're a content expert on most anything? Okay, Sean, and you. What am I doing here? Get up here.
I've done a Bible study in our house for a number of years, and we've had 20 to 24 attend that, and it's not lecture so much.
So it's worked. Sure.
Well, I've been the leader, but there's been a lot of interaction
That's good.
between the people.
Yeah.
It's normally just about 17, with people not.
Well, and listen, if it is working, obviously these are not hard rules, but this is more of a this becomes a metric for how you, as leadership, your discipleship team, is launching groups, and we'll get into why I think 15 is also important. But if that works, that works. Larger than 15, I certainly could see maybe working. I will push back and say, I would get feedback from your group and say, do people feel vested? And just really press that. And we'll talk about why I think a group that big is not. What we could do with a group that big and how we handled it at Eagle. You had a.
I do know from experience I did a Bible study almost all of last year. And like you said, if it gets too intimate, it runs people off, but it also makes it where people do feel uncomfortable, sharing if it's a larger group. Because I know the first thing we did, we started the group out doing a book where, you kind of have to be honest about stuff. You have to kind of look at yourself hard and, you got to be honest. And I told everybody, you don't have to say anything, but if you do, you've got to be honest. After that first time, we had people sharing pretty deep stuff. Maybe not quite that bad, but it was pretty bad. And I know the next week I had probably 6 people not show up that were really excited.
I'm telling you, this is absolutely the case.
Yeah, I went from I think like 20.
You can burn. You can burn people out, and there may be a time for that, but it needs to develop naturally, and we'll talk about some of that later. I want to talk about, just to get a sense, who here has been involved in a small group? Who here has had a bad small group experience? Who here has had good small group experience? Well, that's good. That's a good thing. All right, that's a good thing. Having a good attitude going in, but recognizing that there are bad. Anyone want to share their bad small group experience? No one confessed adultery to me. Like, seriously.
Last year I also taught Sunday school at a different church, and I had a problem where this church that I was at is one of those that everybody knows exactly what they want, and if they don't get it, they get really upset. But it's
never heard a church doing that.
Any group, it's different. People want different things.
Yeah.
So I had one Sunday, somebody said, I don't think you're using the Bible enough. You're not really talking about it enough. So the next week I went through verse by verse by verse and really in depth. And then I had somebody else complain to the pastor that I was using too much Bible. I wasn't leaving enough space for doing anything. So within a month, they were finding somebody else to teach the class because I was either too much or too little Bible or something.
That's a common experience. Any other bad small group experiences? I love hearing bad small group experiences because they help us, understand what to avoid. Anybody else?
It's pretty much like anything. It's based upon the leadership.
Absolutely. And thank you. You must have read my notes. That's the segue I was looking for. It's leadership. It's all about leadership. I'm telling you, this is really the case. And this is why I have a whiteboard. So I'm going to do a word map. Anybody ever done this kind of exercise? Okay. We're just going to throw out adjectives. I'm not going to censor you. You can say whatever comes up. Even if it's a foul word, I'll write it on the board and Jared can turn away. When you think of the word leadership, okay? When you think of the word leadership, what words come to mind?
Charismatic.
Charismatic, interesting.
Mentor.
Organized. Listener.
Communicator.
And I heard organized. What else am I missing? Charismatic, mentor, communicator, organized.
Someone who listens.
Listens. The irony of me not hearing that. Listen.
Accessible.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
You can't spell that.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. I can't. Wait, hold on.
SS. You're right.
Hey,
SS.
catching right for you.
Anybody, if you know that reference, you know why I need that. Accessible, it doesn't matter. Spelling is arbitrary, whatever. Guiding.
Knowledgeable.
Okay, knowledge. Yeah, you got to know something, right?
Interested.
They have to be.
Interesting, yeah.
Interested.
Interested. Oh, in people, yeah.
And interesting.
Yeah, and both. Okay.
Relational.
Relational. What else?
Patient.
Patient.
Reliable.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Okay. We could go on and on and on. Okay. I think these are really good. They kind of create a picture of what we experience as a good leader, okay? And there are many more, I'm sure. Anyone want to share a story of someone they consider a good leader, an experience they've had with a good leader? And I'm not talking just in small groups. Doesn't have to be a small group leader. Just somebody that you think has been an excellent leader, and you've benefited from their leadership. Yes.
Well, David Ketcherson, who's done a lot of discipleship classes here over the years. David was one of those. He would make you realize that he'd make you think. He'd make you think. He would not answer your questions. He would engage. He was excellent at engaging the group.
Yeah.
In a small group. And there was no wrong answers. He had a way of creating that atmosphere of safety.
Sure. Good.
Okay, in the group.
Yeah.
I felt that about David.
Safety up there. I like that.
And acceptance.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else?
Jim Hope.
Oh, well, very good. There you go. No pressure. Anybody else? Maybe non-church leader, somebody that you considered a great leader. Who else?
Like Ed McIntyre. If you can get teenagers, if you can hold their attention and get them involved, you're good.
Yeah. All right. So that's good. Now I have another question. We'll do another word map. When I say good management, good manager, what adjectives come to mind? A good manager.
Organized.
Okay, so organized.
Leader.
Leader.
Caring.
Caring.
It's a lot of the same ones.
Sensitive to their team's needs.
Oh, okay. So sensitive to team. What else? I want you to think broadly, not just, I'm hearing a lot of good Christian words, and I appreciate them, but most of the management you've dealt with is not in the church.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's be real.
I'm thinking work related.
Let's think work. Let's think work.
Objective.
Can be.
Yeah, objective, okay.
Have more than one word, but someone who can see what needs to be done and who is able to do that.
Take charge.
Yes.
Yeah, be able to.
Big picture.
Make assignments or.
Response.
Yeah.
Responsible,
Visionary.
visionary,
Decisive.
decisive.
Well, I guess I might as well leave. What am I doing?
What else? What else? What else?
Oh, no, that's a decision.
What else? From this side of the room. From this side of the room. Because I'm going to start calling people out specifically because we need participation.
Enabling
Enabling? Yeah.
in a positive way.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I've seen that.
Someone who's direct.
Direct. What else? This side of the room. Honest. Yeah.
Leads by example.
Oh, yeah. Example.
Tactical.
Tactical. All right. I want to get your all's thoughts on any differences you've seen between these two, because in leadership studies there are differences. Seriously, and I think I can spot it, but I want you to spot it.
Decisive.
I think what I see here, there's a lot more things that I could tie in with task-oriented things, work.
Goals.
Yeah, specifics. These are much more of the personal attributes. Feeling. Internal, right? Internal.
Emotions.
External. Okay? Now, why do you think I bring this up in the context of small group ministry?
Because a leader has to be.
Yeah, you gotta be both. You gotta be both. And this is really a pitfall in a lot of church small groups that I've run into, because I've done other trainings for other campus ministries, other churches, is everyone gets hung up here and no one deals with this.
I thought you were going to say the opposite. That
No.
you have these people wanting to lead your group.
You have some of that, but you have people, and let's be real, like churches, and no offense to like pastors, because I've been one, churches often model, like the leadership metric oftentimes within a church is somebody who's the most charismatic and this sort of personality. I mean, you've heard the phrase cult of personality. How many pastors are really terrible administrators? Like, I'm just being honest, okay? A lot, okay?
They need a really good business manager.
You need somebody that can actually get stuff done. Now, I've worked with some pastors. Like, I was very fortunate out in Idaho to have a very good boss who could get things done. Now, don't get me wrong. I think to be an effective minister or pastor, you don't have to be. I didn't get business training in seminary, and I say this, respectfully, but the church I go to, my priest is he's a great man. He is honest that he's not the best administrator, but he's one of the best pastors I've ever had in my life. Okay, so don't get me wrong, but when it comes to running a small group, okay, there's a lot of logistics, and we'll get into that, okay? And I think I'm not saying you got to be the greatest manager in the world, but you got to think this way at some level, okay? You got to think about the practical stuff, because, I've heard so many things like, well, the Holy Spirit will just bring this group together. Well, the Holy Spirit's not going to send your emails, okay? Just being honest.
Is that why it's good to have that partnership, though? The host, the manager.
Well, that's we'll get into that. Yeah. So I want to come back to that because I am in total agreement with that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think there's a way, if you don't see yourself as both, to not worry. Okay. Thank you for that. That's a great point. So I do want to ask, because this is always important with a group of Christians. And we could do our own word map, but I won't write it up. I do want you to think about this list, and then I want you to throw out words. When you think of Jesus and the kind of leadership he had, particularly if you think about the Gospels. I hope you've read the Gospels. And if you haven't, I don't know what to say to that.
Where would we find
I think you can get on your Kindle, I've heard, and... But what words come to mind when you think of the leadership of Jesus?
I think that word accessible that Jan said, definitely accessible, because he was among the people.
Yeah, sure. I would agree.
As a Christian leader, I think number one, they have to be a believer.
Well, yeah, if you're not a Christian, you probably shouldn't lead a Christian small group.
I'm serious.
Yeah, no, I've run into this. I say that. No, listen, when I got to Idaho and to that church, we ran into this. People who would, now, to be fair, they thought they were Christians, and then you get to talking to them, and it's like, oh, okay, they don't believe in this, and this, and this, and it's like, that's not mere Christianity in any definition. We're not talking about differences between certain particularities, but that's a great point. You have to have commitment. You have to actually believe. We'll talk about that. What else? The leadership of Jesus.
He was confident. He knew who he was.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was relational.
Yeah, he was. Compassionate.
But direct and honest.
He was. Yeah, he could be pretty honest.
By example, too.
Absolutely. Paul sees that, right, in Philippians 2. Have this mind among yourselves, which was the mind of Christ, right? The Philippians hymn, that though being in the form of God, he did not count equality with God as something to be grasped, but he emptied himself, right? He humbles himself. And so I want you to keep that in mind, that as I'm talking about these sort of pragmatic principles, I'm doing this under the assumption that our model of leadership is Jesus Christ. And for me, nothing best sums that up than when Jesus tells his disciples that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And when he tells his disciples, he who wishes to be greatest in the kingdom will be least. First shall be last, okay? And what's so funny is secular leadership studies are confirming these things all the time. Has anybody read the book Eat Last? Has anybody heard of that book? It's just great. People people talk to me about this at UT, like, have you read this revolutionary idea that leaders eat last? And, they put themselves last. And I'm like, wow, I've never heard of that. It's true. You will really win the hearts of your people and their loyalty if you put yourself last and eat last. Here are some things if you want to jot down, and then we're going to go do a small group activity. Here are some things that I think are just key points to remember in managing and leading a group, okay? The first one, and I think the reason I list it first is because of just how often people fail at this, is communication. How well do you communicate to your group? How often should you communicate to your small group? Well, some of this will depend on the nature of the group, the history of the group. If you've got an established group, there's something different going on. But if you're starting a group, here's something I suggest, very practical. And this is how I would do it. You start the group. This is your first week, okay? You get everyone's email address, text, phone numbers, and you do your small group, let's say, on a Monday, all right? You do a follow-up email on Wednesday. And then the group's on Monday. You do another email on Saturday evening to remind them to come. I'm saying 1 to 2 emails a week. How often does it take to communicate to somebody before they finally pick up what's happening, how many times do you have to tell people, how many times have you had to tell your kids, I need you to do this before they actually figure out you need them to do it, right? You just say it once and people understand, right? We're terrible people, we just need to hear things over and over. So communicate frequently, okay? Now, not invasively, not texting every single day, but just coming across that you care, that you actually are interested in this group working. Steady communication gives that feeling of, wow, this is serious. And we'll talk about how and what you should communicate. Communication in front of a group. Are you comfortable in being in front of a small group? Are you actually comfortable doing this? That's something to consider. If this is going to really cause a lot of personal angst and turn your stomach into knots, you may need to consider that. Now, I'm not talking about the difference between extroversion and introversion. There are plenty of introverts who are great public speakers. And I'm sure you may know people like that. I'm talking about this idea, are you comfortable? Are you comfortable in front of a group? Okay? Here's a big one, and I say this as somebody that's been on this side of the fence. How good are you at communicating with your pastoral team? Okay? Your discipleship team. Now, some of this is going to be how this church chooses to build that relationship, because it's both ways. But I would encourage you to send some sort of monthly update to your pastoral team on how the group is going. They want to know. And we'll talk about that a little later, okay? Here's another one, management of time and personalities. And we'll talk about that. This is one of the small group activities. One of the biggest killers of group is disrespect of time. It's just, not honoring somebody's time. Who here has been in a group that just, and it doesn't have to be a church group, but you've been in that group where the meeting just went longer and longer. How likely are you to come back to that? Right? You can't even say a word. You're like, ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh, I hate those people.
Yes.
Yeah, seriously, it's a big deterrent. Management of time. Management of personalities, right? Who here knows a difficult person? Right? And not just difficult personalities, but quiet personalities. Being able to actually pull information out of people, pull input out of people, learning how to ask those questions. And we'll talk about some techniques, okay? Some of your quietest people are maybe some of the most insightful in the group. And you've just not asked them to really speak up, okay? So management of time and personalities. Do people feel their time is respected? Ownership of outcomes. If the group goes bad, it's your fault. You just need to think that way. I'm sorry. That's good leadership. You need to own the outcome. Well, I just had this difficult person, and it just so-and-so. No, you're the leader. Buck up. It's your responsibility. It's your responsibility. It is. That's what leadership is. You take ownership of your outcomes. You can't blame others. And not just blaming others, but you got to be proactive. If you see an issue, address it. Okay? You got to get ahead of the curve. You got to anticipate problems. Assume things are going to go bad, right? Just think, I'm going to show up and everything's going to go bad. And when it's great, you'll feel good. Seeking consultation within the group, okay? Part of ownership is actually getting others to own the process. Here's another one we talked about, but being a servant. I know this goes without saying, but I say it anyway. Do you actually care about the people you're over? If you don't, please leave. You're not going to be a good small group leader. If you actually don't care about people, you shouldn't be a small group leader. Okay? Here's another big one, and I was always surprised to find this one out from small group leaders. How often are you personally praying for those in your group? And if you're not doing it daily, you should. People are so afraid of making prayer lists. I highly, highly encourage you to get a little notebook where you're writing prayer requests down, and you're actively looking at that every day. And if you don't think prayer works, you probably shouldn't be a small group leader. Have you created a hospitable and safe environment? Okay. Now, I mean, you need to have a place where people tangibly feel welcome. And how do you think that happens? What does a hospitable and safe environment look like? Are there some practical things like, can you sense a hospitable and safe environment when you enter a room? Do you know it's safe? Is there something instinctual in you that knows it's safe or not? Do you agree or disagree? I think sometimes you sense like, oh, this feels unsafe. What are ways that you know something is safe or not safe when you walk into a group?
People's expressions.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I know this goes without saying, if a new person shows up to the group, please greet them. I've seen this. I'm not lying. I'm telling you, I managed a lot of groups, and I couldn't tell you how many complaint emails I got. I went to the group you sent me to, and they were so rude. You know how far a handshake and a hello and let me introduce you can go? I mean, I'm being serious. Creating circles, right, in your group. Creating a comfortable environment. If you're not greeted within, I mean, this is kind of something interesting to know, like within church studies. People make a decision whether or not they're going to come back to a church within the first 8 minutes of their experience. Now, I want you to think about that. What has happened within the first 8 minutes? We're talking about arriving on the parking lot. So we're talking about actually pulling up in your vehicle, starting. It takes you about, 2 to 3 minutes to park. You walk in the door, and then you're looking around, and by the time you're seated, that's 8 minutes. So before they've heard how terrible your worship band is or how terrible your pastor is, they've made their decision.
They better hope Peggy's on her spot.
But I'm serious. And it's the same thing for small groups. They're going to make the decision before you started the content. Okay? It's just the way we work. Yeah. Punctuality. That's respect. Yeah, that's time management. That's part of time management. If you say something's going to start at 4, be reliable, okay? And then finally, loyalty, okay? I thought about putting this under the servant idea, but I wanted to specify loyalty on two sides of the, one, you're loyal to your group. That goes without saying. You're loyal to the people. But I really, really want to emphasize this because if there's something I've seen go wrong more than once, it's this. Are you loyal to Broad Street United Methodist Church? And if you're not, do not be a small group leader. I am telling you absolutely right now, don't punish my brother, okay? Because you're just going to cause lots of problems. Church within a church. Guess what? You don't need a church within a church. Your small group is not a church within a church. It's a small group, okay? There's no apostolic precedent for forming this, all right? It's good, but you're not a pastor. God didn't call you to lead a sect away. And if you think he did, you need counseling. I have seen churches destroyed over this, and I get very mad when I see this. I hate this stuff. I hate it, okay? If you're not loyal to your leadership and you're not loyal to this church, I'm not talking about being a sycophant, okay? I'm not talking about being a company man. If there's honest critique, but you know that can be done within the context of loyal relationship. I'm committed here. I have issues, but I'm staying, okay? All right, that's very important. All right.
And isn't confidentiality amongst the group?
Yeah, okay. Now listen. Okay, now we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that.
Someone's a blabber and they're in your group.
Guess what? You all are so good at segues. All right. We're going to pass these around, okay? This side of the room is going to be group 1. Okay, now I'm going to break you up into smaller groups, and this side is going to be group 2. This pertains to the particular activity, okay? So this side of the room, you're going to do small group 1 exercise. This side of the room, you're going to do small group 2 exercise. I want you on your own. I shouldn't have to tell you how to do this. I want you to break up into groups of 5 or 6, okay? Circle up, get over how you need to do 5 or 6. If it's more than that, that's fine. But I'd like to see 2 or 3 groups on this side, and this is a little larger size, so like maybe 4 or 5 groups over here, 3 or 4. But however you need to circle up, I've got instructions here. I want you to read this and do this exercise, okay? You've got 15-ish minutes, okay? I'm not looking for anything to blow my mind away, but 1, 2, okay? Here we go. Take some of these and pass them around. All right. So, we're going to start on this side. Small group 1, and let's start with this table right here. This group right here.
Oh, they think they're so smart.
This is the smart group. These are the teachers. No, I'm just. So on this side of the room, if in case you didn't read small group 1, start us out. Tell us what's going on within this group so everyone is clear the issue.
Sure. Okay. And why does it speak?
Speak away.
Okay, it says here that I'll say I am a new small group leader that has been in this that has joined this small group that's been struggling, and they've been together for a couple of years, but they've been struggling maintaining people in there. It says here that that there is a core group of 4 folks that are very dedicated to the group. But recently, a number of people from the group have left, and they blame this guy named Stan, who's in the group, who is very overbearing. Personality that he has in the group is, I get the thing that he's very abrasive. Stan was the primary reason, Becca told us, Stan was the primary reason that Becca, the former group leader, decided to step down as a leader and lead the group. To quote Becca from her conversation with the staff, I really enjoyed leading the group, but Stan seems to dominate the group. The group has dwindled over the last 6 months. He talks about himself and he carries on way over time and all this stuff. And people are leaving because they just don't enjoy Stan being in the group. Basically, that's it. So
how do you, what did you all talk about? What do you think are some ways, solutions, ideas? And there's no, this is not like a baiting question, okay? Because there's ways to nuance this, even in defense of Stan, okay? So I'm really looking for what you came up with.
Are we the ones that had this question? These two?
Everyone on this side.
Yeah, okay. Our solution was, the initial solution was to hire a couple of people from Polk County to take him out. But really,
That was Peggy, I bet.
All right.
But actually,
Bubba and Merv.
But actually what we came up with is we felt like the group leader, the new leader, who is new into the group, relatively new, should pull Stan aside and address the situation and talk to Stan about becoming more involved with the group rather than dominating the group. We talked about if it doesn't work the first time, then do it again, and do it again, and do it as many times as you think is necessary, and even to the point of calling Stan out in front of people. You know, when we're saying talk to Stan, we were saying do it in private, set up a luncheon with him, or something that the leader wants to do. But in class, if he's not getting the message, then kind of call him out a little bit and say, well, Stan, that's a great point. We've heard enough. Let's hear from so-and-so at a time, you know, and give others and put Stan down to a point to where others had an opportunity to talk. We talked about, you know, maybe there's underlying reasons why Stan does this.
Sure, that's great. Good. I'm
Try
glad.
to find out why he operates like this, you know. At any rate, and then we said if we never can find a solution, we go to the pastoral staff and let them take care of it. If that doesn't work, then we go back to the Polk County.
You go to the Polk County. How about this table?
You said a lot of the same.
Okay.
We actually first said we probably would consult with the pastoral.
So you start.
Yeah.
And I don't think either is wrong. I think if a small group leader feels comfortable handling on this on, you know, it's fine. But starting's not bad either because you're new, right?
Yeah, right. And another thing, and I'll let you talk about it.
No, I don't.
But, you know, I think as the leader, if this person is insulting, I mean, isn't that what it said? It's like he's taking belittling of people. Yeah, as the leader, you can't allow that.
Right,
in your
correct.
group.
At all.
So that has to be
It's got to be dealt with.
dealt with, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and then you guys jump in.
And then we said that we would just send everybody else the email except Stan. We weren't gonna send them to Polk County.
That's the way high school guys break up with girlfriends. So how about this group?
So we took a similar beginning route as the second group, really saying that pastoral staff, if there's a small group leader that's quitting because of this individual, that's the time for pastoral staff to step in, go ahead and have a conversation before the new leader shows up. The new leader shouldn't be a part of that group because I don't think that person should have a negative relationship with Stan on day one.
Yeah.
So then from there, it would be new leader establishing norms within the group, working with Stan to be a part of those norms. I believe accountable talk was brought up a couple of times and how to monitor oneself during that conversation. And then if the issue continues, begin to have the one-on-one conversations away from the
Yeah. So I'm seeing in summation a lot of involving pastoral staff, all three groups, and that's important. We're going to talk about that. One-on-one, very important, right? And then I love the fact that, you know, the nuance of saying there could be a pastoral concern underneath. Why is Stan acting this way? And it's always important to ask the why, to probe the why. There's a saint I'm rather fond of, Saint Macarius, who says that in every human heart is both good and evil. There are the throne room of God, but there's also dragons and monsters and demons. And so every person is going to wrestle with this. So that's good. That's good. On this side, if someone here could tell your compatriots on the other side of the room your particular issue and what you guys came up with. Jim, you're a leader. Remember they said that. So.
He got a star.
Yeah.
Well, the issue is a small group that's only been running about 3 months. It doesn't say what the focus of the group is, but it has about 10 persons that get along well. And a new person joins the group, and this person has issues. At first, it seemed that Erica was just sharing her concerns about the church through asking for prayer for things. But then it got a little more pointed in that very critical of the senior pastor and his sermons.
I even knew your pastor's name.
And he put Micah in there. His preaching it seemed a little like he is being judgmental and worried about and harsh in these sermons. I mean, last week he told us to take stock of our own sins and ask Christ to heal our darkness. And she probably had a problem with this. And she said if he keeps going down this road, he's going to run half the church off.
Yeah.
So after hearing this, we were asked how we would address this behavior in the context of the group. So, we sort of had experiences of like this, of people bringing these issues about the church into a group that had a different focus, not their church, talk about the problems at the church. You have to stop it some way. It will destroy the group if you don't. It will cause people to take sides. It will split them right down the middle. So the leader pretty much has to set some boundaries about what you're going to do within the group meeting.
Yeah, it's very good, yeah.
And, you know, a suggestion was you have an agenda for the meeting, you stay on track, and don't go down these rabbit trails about what's going on at the church that you disagree with and all this sort of thing.
But Logan had a point about taking the person, or having a lesson about.
Are you sure you can't hear you?
Why don't you?
Well, the idea that I have, which I've used before, is instead of, going one-on-one with them and like really being aggressive, because that a lot of times will run people off.
Sure.
I've noticed that a lot of
Yeah.
times. When you do that, they feel like they're being attacked, so they don't want to come anymore. So what I usually will do is the next lesson will be about, like in this case, it'll be about gossip, like why gossip's wrong and why we shouldn't do it as Christians. And that way you're kind of attacking them without attacking them. So as long as they're listening, they feel like, oh, I see, but you're not actually saying, hey, you're wrong.
That's how every pastor writes their sermons. No, it's true though. I mean, there's some validity to that. I mean, we'd want to nuance that, but we could talk about that. Yeah.
The one thing that I had done in a group before was we were a Bible study group, and so we had a lesson or subject we were studying, and I said, well, what we need to do is come here together and study the Bible and see what the Bible says, and then we can form our opinions and use the Bible as our resource when we discuss these issues at another location.
Yeah, sure, it's good. How about the back group? That good, huh?
Go, Gary.
Well, we kind of felt like there was probably some context we needed to, we had a lot of different ways to approach it, I think.
That's fine, yeah, let's hear
But,
that.
Redirecting directing that person to speak with Micah about those concerns, I think was what we felt like. And that's a good, the issue was a good conversation that we felt like we could have within the context of our small group, because this person may obviously have some issues or difficulties with the sermon in her own heart and mind, things that she's done with, and could our group help her to reconcile some of those issues, but take Micah out of the picture, and just address some of those issues
redirect.
in our small group.
Yeah. Yeah, to the point. I mean, that's a great point. I mean, perhaps there is a particular struggle in this person's life that Micah's sermon, and this is a real. Both of these things happened.
But I didn't want to wait a week and do a lesson on it. I thought we needed to kind of stop it right then.
Well, I think, and what, Leah, I would say, if you're wanting my advice, that particular example is pointed enough that I gave you to where it needs to be addressed to say, and I've done this, and it's okay to say, we're not going to talk about our pastors that way.
That's where the boundaries.
We're not going to talk, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but to say, it's not on the agenda, and we're going to talk about why the agenda is your best friend in a small group. It's not on the agenda, and I want to talk, and then that's when you can have the conversation that this back group sort of really brought out, that there could be a real deep pastoral concern. The conviction is actually a thing. Who knew? It's a biblical word. People might feel that way. So that's good. I really enjoyed that discussion. Stay there in your groups because we're going to have one more here in a second. But here's some practical tips, very practical, that can help you in managing these scenarios, okay? when I worked for the Red Cross, one of the things I helped train some of the staff in was nonverbal communication. Super important. If you can't read nonverbal, please start reading about nonverbal communication. What's the quickest way to tell you've lost somebody in a conversation in a small group? What's the first sign? No eye contact. What motivates that no eye contact? This is an important question. They're not angry. They're not frustrated. They're uncomfortable and they're embarrassed. They feel like this is awkward. There's an issue of shame actually involved. They're just uncomfortable. They can't look you in the eye. So that's your first. Maintain good eye contact. What do people look like when they're uncomfortable beyond the eye contact?
They squirm.
They squirm. One of the best things that's ever happened in reading small group, reading nonverbal is this thing right here. If this is getting pulled out, you've lost them. You teach, right? You know this. I mean, this is a clear indicator. Well, they're going to fail the final. And maybe even addressing that on the front end of a no cell phone policy, actually. That's something important.
I'm taking notes on myself. I don't know. Thank you very much.
But there are ways you can read body language. How do you know when people are engaged?
They lean forward.
They lean forward. They are writing things down. They're smiling. I mean, honestly, you just learn to be intuitive, okay? Be proactive and be looking, because that's important, okay? Here's another practical tip. Don't be afraid to interrupt. Okay? If somebody's taking over the group, put an end to it. Just politely say, that's not on the agenda, and we're going to talk about that. Well, that's a great point. But let's hear from someone else. That's a phrase I use a lot. That's a great point, but let's hear from someone else. Okay? It's probably not a great point, but you can say it politely. That's a great point about aliens in the Bible, but let's move on to somebody else. You got to nip it, right? Barney Fife.
That's Stan in that first.
That's Stan. Yeah. You got to just put it into it. And you know what? People are pretty good at self-correcting, especially in the context of a group. We're not talking about shaming somebody, but people can pick up on that, okay? If you do interrupt that person and it becomes a little more confrontational within the group, you are obligated to do a follow-up conversation with that person one-on-one. If you've had that level of interaction in the group, you need to make a phone call or talk to them, okay?
I'm so sorry I shut you off, but I just didn't really feel like we needed to.
Correct. You need follow-up. You need to build rapport, okay? And because you're shepherding this person. Encourage quiet people to speak. I really always have to say this, but it's so true. How do you do that? There's some great ways to say that. I mean, hey, we've not heard from you. What do you think about this? Not to put you on the spot, but what do you bring? Really just make it direct. Like, hey, we've not heard from you in this group, and we want to hear your insight. What in your experience? This is a great phrase. In your experience, how does this add up? And that sort of forces somebody to kind of, and you might find they're very insightful. Now, there's a limit to that. Hey, do you got anything to add? And you tell me no. No, but no, really. But no, really. But what? Do you have anything? You're going to make somebody feel like crap, okay? If they say no, move on, okay? They may be very comfortable saying nothing and getting a lot out of the group. Don't assume that being quiet means they're getting nothing out of the group, okay? All right? Don't be afraid. Now, this is one that is controversial, but I believe in it, and I think you should do it. Don't be afraid of kicking someone out of the group. I'm talking, now, this is going to be, we're going to talk about how, this is sort of HR best practices, all right? Within the field of HR and management, you've got to document why you're letting somebody go, right? You got to be able to say, I talked to you the first time. I talked to you the second time. I talked to you the third time. I talked to you the fourth time. We've met with pastoral staff. And this is the language we use at Eagle, and I think it's very important. And you're putting the onus back on that person. You're not saying, we're kicking you out of the group. This is the language you use. It seems to me that you don't want to be a part of this group, and we're allowing you to go. You can recuse yourself. And that's how you do it. Because the truth is, you're not kicking them out of the group. Their behavior is, they don't need to be there, and you can let them go. Does that make sense? We've had these conversations, and it just seems like this is not helping you in your journey. It's time to go.
Maybe there's a group that could better serve you as well.
Yeah, there's a group that could probably better serve you, and I'll be happy to set up another meeting with the pastoral staff. But it's just not working.
Or let them lead one.
Yeah. Yeah. Jared is like, no. Yeah.
How would you do that in a Sunday school?
You know, because you're on, that's a little more direct. You need to talk with Jared and Micah and Betsy. That really, when it's on site, especially, that's a real direct pastoral issue. There's a level of ownership they have, here that they don't have when they're at the small group. Now, again, granted, it's still the loyalty issue. When you're going to let somebody go, you have to involve pastoral staff. There has to be a documentation that you've talked to somebody in the pastoral staff. If you let this person go and then Jared gets an email from this person saying, I got kicked out of my group, and this is the first time he's hearing that, that's bad. That's really bad. Okay, this is just like HR management best practices, right? This is what you do. In your day-to-day life, okay? Ask for feedback. All right? You need to ask for feedback. You need to ask somebody that you trust in the group every week, how'd I do? How'd it go? Give me some thoughts. Make sure this person isn't like you. Don't create an echo chamber, How'd I do? You did great. Thanks. You did great too. Let's make out. Oh, okay. No. Don't do that. What's great is if it may be your spouse, because they already know how to tell you how you're doing something wrong. Ask them, how'd I do? You did, and honestly, I do this, seriously, like when I used to preach and teach more in church context, I'd ask my wife, how'd I do? And she would say, you lost them within 10 minutes. Well, whatever. Thanks, dear. I'm gonna go fish now. All right. Ask for feedback. Ask for feedback. Ask from the group. Okay. At the end of your small group season, and Jared can help form this and get this all to you, and I can even make suggestions to him afterwards, like a teacher evaluation style. And I can send him certain metrics that I think are important. You need to be, if you want to grow as a leader, you have to have feedback. And you need to ask for it, okay? And I like numbers. I like quantitative things, on this issue you were a 4, on this issue you were a 5. I think that can help you grow, okay?
You need to make sure that the feedback's honest, though.
Yeah.
You need somebody who'll...
Yeah, it's got to be honest. It's worthless if it's just, you're fine. If somebody says that's not the person you need to ask for feedback, okay? Here's a big thing about, and this is a philosophy thing, that I can't make this decision. It has to come from within the church, okay, from your discipleship team. But this is my personal philosophy with small groups, particularly in how I'll ask this question. Would you like to see in 2 years more small groups then than there are today? Okay. How do you do that? What's the best way to do that? It's not identifying new leaders within the church. You've already made that call. You're here. So how do you do it? What's that?
Do you break off?
It's branching, birthing new groups. Okay, and this is why I mentioned with your group. Maybe this larger group, okay, and it's hard. This is a hard thing to do, and it's got to be done over time. The first step is saying, who could take over if I weren't here? And you need to be able to answer that. 1, because you're probably not going to be there every week. And then 2, if you can answer that question honestly, you probably know a small group leader. Who could take over if I weren't here? And that's one of the best ways to launch a new group. You have somebody that's already been trained because they've seen you do it. They've been involved. They're trusted, right? You've identified this person. And then you can launch a new group. And now I'm not going to get into the specifics, but I could actually do a whole nother session on how that works and how we could navigate that. And it's a very effective model. It's how you do it, okay? And then here's a final practical consideration. Have fun. If it's not fun, they're not going to come back. If no one laughed at the end of your group, you're host. I mean, seriously, it's a metric of success. If they're not enjoying themselves, they're not going to come back. Remember, we fronted this whole conversation that we're fulfilling a sociological need here, a need for community. All right? And Americans like to laugh. All right? Some practical considerations, okay, related to the confidentiality question. Is this a closed or an open group? Okay, what I mean by that is once you've got your number, if it's a closed group, you form it and no new people are coming in. And there are certain groups that need that. Okay, if your group is going to be an accountability group or a group of people who, well, for example, at Eagle, we had a group of former alcoholics and drug addicts. That's a closed group. Once those groups are formed, we don't put new people in because the stuff they're talking about is very, very confidential, okay? Now, you've got to have the right kind of leader, but those are closed groups, okay? Open groups are groups where anyone can come in and out, okay? There's a level of confidentiality, but recognize that that dynamic of having people who can come in is going to change the feel of how those things are done in terms of confidentiality. It goes without saying, but I say it because, my goodness, it comes up in every stinking church. If somebody confesses something involving children, you are obligated by law to report that. Okay? You are obligated. If they've broken some heavy laws, you got to report it. All right? And that becomes an accountability issue for your pastoral staff. It's a legal issue. Okay? I don't care how close you think your group is, you're obligated. You're obligated. You got to, okay? I have to say it. I assume everybody knows it, but I've seen it. And every time you hear about it, you go, why didn't you should know. So, but I'm telling you, so now that you're accountable for that information. All right? Those are some practical considerations. Other things, is this going to be an ongoing group? What I mean by that is, are you never going to break? This is the group that doesn't end. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. I recommend a 3-month cycle, okay? Almost semester model, you know? So you can do, if you're gonna do a summer group, recognize summer groups are very hard. Who's had that experience? Do people travel in the summer? Okay, having a summer group is just very difficult. What I recommend, fall seasons for small groups, 3-month cycle based on your church's calendar, which is probably tied into the school calendar. That's realistic, okay? People live that way. You break in the winter, right? You have a winter break, and then you reconvene in the spring. In summer, do 3 social events to keep the group together, okay? But don't try to have a group. You're just gonna burn the momentum. People, there's a phrase I've heard and I really like, nothing breeds success like success. If people show up to a group and there's like 4 people and it has that feel of like, it's like, well, they don't have they're not gonna come back. So if you're intentional about these efforts and you're intentional about gathering people together, that success will breed success, okay? Is it gonna be a book study? Is it gonna be topical? Is it gonna be up to the teacher's discretion? Now, some of this is however your discipleship staff wants you to do. I've heard there's a group that's going to do, prayer beads. I'm all about that. I have them, That's great. That's topical, right? That's a book study that's kind of got a topic. Are you going to do a Bible study? Are you going to do sermon-based? One of the best ways I would really recommend this, if you're not doing this, is to have a group that meets and talks about the sermon from the previous Sunday.
I've heard that's really
It's very, very effective. And if your pastors know you're doing that, they're going to preach better. And there's absolute research. I'm telling you, it's true. There is research that verifies it. Because if Jared knows, oh crap, they're going to talk about what I've talked about, I better make sure I get up there and, don't give them a horse and pony show and actually give them some substance, So I make fun of Jared's preaching.
It is a horse and pony show.
I told him he was if his preaching was a movie, it'd be Fast and Furious. It was very entertaining, but maybe not so much on the content. But I'm serious. I would recommend that one of these groups that has not, if you've not picked your topic, experiment with the sermon-based subject, and then I'll talk to your pastoral staff about how to generate those questions. Okay? Well, but they're preaching from the same text.
They are.
That's all that matters. That's all that matters. Okay, so we're going to wrap things up. Two things that I think you should develop, and we're going to do an activity, and then you're free to go after this. What's that? I know. Well, that was him. He gave me your time limit. You know, I said 2 a.m. to him. So, but seriously, two things to consider. One, we've already talked about the weekly agenda. That is super important. Okay, what could that include? Actually designating the topics to be addressed, the structure, the outline. That is the best way to take an over talker and say, hey, we got to move along. We want to get through the material. And people don't get offended because it's on the agenda, okay? Here's another thing I really, really stress and recommend. A small group covenant. This is almost like a code of code of conduct for a business, right? This is terms of employment, to use HR language. This could be drafted by your pastoral staff, and I would really encourage your discipleship team to come up with this. I could send suggestions, and I would be glad to do that. But things that address the goals and vision of your group, the level of commitment, how we define confidentiality. Okay, if you put in how we define gossip, needs to be in there. Okay, commitment to Broad Street United Methodist Church. Your ethical commitments, things like we're going to be relational, we're going to show up on time, we're going to listen to one another. You specify these things. It's 1.5 pages, 2 pages, just bullet points. Here's what we're going to do. And you have every person that's a part of that group sign it. You just have them sign it. And you know what? What's so great about that is when you've got Stan, or you've got, what's her face? I can't remember her name now. Erica. And you say, hey, you're having that one-on-one conversation, like, you agreed to this. Like, you agreed to this. It's so good when you can put it back on someone else, right? It's not, and because buy-in is so important. Now, if you need to go, you can go. What I'd like you to do, though, on the back of those pages,
Well, thank you so much for taking your time to watch our small group training video. I hope you found it informative and inspirational. Small groups are crucial to the life of the church. They build community, they form lasting friendships, they increase our ability to grow in discipleship and our love of Jesus Christ. So please, email me at the link that you see below and let me know what you thought and how we can help you in your journey in being a small group leader. I look forward to meeting with you and talking to you more about being a small group leader here at Broad Street.